weight, the sin which doth so easily beset us. Going back to Romans where it says, present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service, and be not conformed to this world. The way this world eats, drinks, dresses, what they watch. As you'll see as we go through this series, it's having an effect on every single cell in our body. And our brain has 1 trillion brain cells. Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. Weren't we talking about the body? You cannot separate the mind and the body. There is a health message in the Bible. It is the best medical book that we have. And there is a verse in the Bible that you may never ever have viewed as a part of the health message. The title of my meeting this afternoon is The DNA and the True Cause of Disease. Did you know that the DNA is talked about in the Bible? It is talked about in Psalm 139. Let's have a look at it. O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. Thou knowest my down sitting and uprising, and understandeth my thought afar off. Thou hast set me behind and before, and art acquainted with all my ways. There is not a word in my tongue, but thou, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether. Thou hast set me behind and before, and hast laid thine hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. Whither shall I go from thy spirit? Whither shall I flee from thy spirit? If I go up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall guide me. If I say, surely the darkness will cover me. No, even the darkness shall be light about thee, for the darkness hideth not from me, but the light shineth as the day. The night and the dark are both alike to thee. Thou hast possessed my reins. Thou hast covered me in my mother's wombs. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvellous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. I would like to suggest that the most marvellous act of creation is this human body. And of this human body, it would have to be the mind. Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Only then can you prove what is that good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully, wonderfully made. Marvellous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. This week you will be exclaiming that so often as we go right inside the workings of the human body. That will give you an understanding of why we have to do what we've got to do to get the most out of this body. And I think that's why you're here now, is you want the most out of this body. The next verse, we're looking at the DNA. My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being imperfect, in thy book were all my members written, which in continuance were fashioned, when as yet there was none of them. What's it referring to here? It's referring to the DNA, the genetic code inside every cell in the body. What is this genetic code? We each have 23 chromosomes from our mother. And my mother's chromosomes determine that I have blue eyes and light hair. 23 chromosomes from our father. My father's chromosomes determine that I am short, that I'm 62 and haven't got much grey hair yet. In fact, next month is my father's 90th birthday, and he has a light sprinkling of white amongst his dark hair. It's in the genes. There's a huge amount of information in the genes. And if you were to put all the information that is in the DNA into alphabetical language, it would fill 1,000 books with 1,000 pages and 3,000 letters on each page. Whoa, I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvellous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, according to the pattern. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being imperfect. We have all been born with imperfect DNAs, and we're going to look at that. In thy book were all my members written, which in continuance were fashioned, when as yet there was none of them. I gave birth to 6 babies, and one of my babies I was privileged to deliver myself. They thought I had a long time to go. Amazing experience. Holding a baby that comes out of your... I think, oh, what a wonderful experience. Oh, why women denied this one. My babies. It wasn't until I held them in my arms that I could see. But God sees. God sees as that baby is being formed in the womb. It's being formed according to the genetic code. It was 1953. I was going to say I remember it well, but I was born, so I couldn't remember it. But I remember the date because that's the year I was born. 1953, headlines in the newspaper said, secret of life had been discovered. Watson and Crick's, 2 scientists, had been able to unravel the DNA. The DNA is the genetic code inside every cell in the body. And when you think about it, we are just a bunch of cells. We have brain cells, eye cells, bone cells, tissue cells, skin cells, pancreatic cells. And to understand the workings of the body, we need to go right inside the cell. I call it the CBD, the central business district of the human body. Here it is here, the cell. And right in the nucleus of the cell is the DNA. And what these 2 scientists had been able to undo was unravel and pull out that DNA. Do you know it's 2 meters long if it's pulled out? And we have 100 trillion cells in our body. Phenomenal information. And the psalmist that said, I will praise you for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. He didn't know what I've just shown you here. What is the DNA made up of? It's made up from the food we eat. The outside strands are made up of polysaccharides. Polysaccharides sounds like a very complicated word, but it really just means many sugars. That's the outside strands. The inside bands is made up of amino acids. And amino acids is a breakdown from the protein that we eat. There's the amino acids. And the glue that glues these 2 together is minerals. And the food that is the highest in minerals is the vegetables. And the vegetable that is the highest is greens, dark, green, leafy vegetables. Have you had your dark, green, leafy vegetables today? My father used to say, Barbara, it's just rabbit food. But when I studied nutrition several years ago now, I was astonished at the amount of minerals contained in the dark, green, leafy vegetables. Hippocrates, called the father of medicine, 400 years BC, he said, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. And he didn't know what I've just shown you there. And when I'm in some supermarkets and I look at some trolleys and I look at the food that are in some trolleys, I wonder how their DNA will ever be made. Terribly deficient in the basic nutrients required for our DNA to function properly. Nothing I do will ever change the fact that I'm 5'2.5". Nothing I do will change the fact that I have brown, straight hair. Nothing I do will change the fact that my eyes are blue. And because of that fact, it seems to be a tiny little step to say, nothing I do will change the fact that I'm going to die of rheumatoid arthritis because my mother did. In fact, my mother died a cripple in a wheelchair at the age of 51 with rheumatoid arthritis. Well, I'm now, it's 11 years on for me from 51, and I'm not a cripple in a wheelchair with rheumatoid arthritis. The fact is that genetics loads the gun, but it is lifestyle that pulls the trigger. In fact, a lot of research is showing today that only 2% can be applied to the genes. Isn't that good news? I do not have to fear dying a cripple in a wheelchair. I have strong inherited genes towards arthritis, And every now and then, a part of my body does this. How does it do that? Oh, a joint starts aching. And when that joint starts aching, what's my body want me to do? Listen. What do I do when that happens? Oh, I'll just reassess what I'm doing in my life at the moment. I'll reassess my last week. I'll apply a grated ginger poultice to it. That'll pull the inflammation out. I'll take some high-dose turmeric capsules, fantastic anti-inflammatory. And you know what that knocking does? It stops knocking. Isn't it nice to know what to do? Because we are all born with imperfect genes, as Psalm 139 says. Mine eyes did see thy substance, yet being imperfect. In thy book were all my members written, which in continuance were fashioned, when as yet there was none of them. Do you know God doesn't have to have a very big book? All that has to be in our book, in his book, is our DNA. Maybe it's about this big. And it's got the DNA of everyone who's ever lived, and everyone who's living now, and everyone who will ever live. Well, then, it's just in the DNA. Just incredible information is the DNA. You see, it was only since 1953, when it said, secret of life has been discovered, that the attention went on the genes. Why did they say secret of life had been discovered? Because they thought the secret of why people are sick and how they can get better would be all in the genes. 62 years ago. Had the secret of life been discovered? Are people any better? No. In fact, there are movie stars that are having a gene test to find out they've got the gene for breast cancer, and they're taking their breasts off. Is that the way God wants us to do it? And I hear the whole lot of ladies followed suit. No, no need. Genetics loads the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. And this field of study is called epigenetics. Do you know what that means? We can switch our genes on or off by the way we live, by the way we eat. Could it be that simple? Yes, it can. Yes, it can. If someone has breast cancer, one of the biggest contributing factors to that is the contraceptive pill. So much easier to blame the genes. Can you see that? The pharmaceutical companies don't want you to blame the pill, but we're going to be looking at that in a later meeting. What I'd like to look at now is how we're remade, because we're constantly being remade according to the pattern, according to the formula that is in the DNA. In fact, did you know we've got a totally new body about every 2 years? I used to say to people, you've got to look after this body. If you wreck your car, you can get another one. But if you wreck the body, we're stuck with it. Well, I don't say that anymore. Because if you start to change the way you're treating this body, in 2 years you can have a new body. Isn't that good news? We've got a new skin every month. Where does the old one go? Isn't that why we wash our clothes and wash our sheets and vacuum our floor and do all that? It's constantly being shed off. We've got new liver about every 6 weeks. We've got new bones about every 3 months. New eye cells every 1 to 2 days. And the next quickest are the cells that line our gastrointestinal tract. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to take you on a journey through your gastrointestinal tract. We're going to start at the mouth and we're going to end up at the other end. It's a fascinating journey to see what happened to the food you ate at lunchtime, what broke it down to microscopic particles taken into the CBD so that every cell in our body runs. The cells that line our gastrointestinal tract are remade every 3 to 5 days. The lining of the gastrointestinal tract looks like this. It's lined with villi. The new cell is made down here, And one writer described there as the nursery. It's where the new cell is made. And then it travels up and off it goes and gets taken away with the rest of the waste every 3 to 5 days. So what I'm going to show you now is we're going to have a look at how a new gastrointestinal tract cell is made. But let me just touch on this one. The gastrointestinal tract is an interesting part of the body because it's not part of the body. What do I mean by that? It's a hollow tube. And anything that goes into that hollow tube is not part of you or me till it gets broken down to tiny substances absorbed into the blood. Then it becomes part of you and me. And what does the Bible call the blood? The life of the flesh. Because the blood is the carrier of the oxygen, the carrier of the nutrients, the carrier of the water, all to the CBD. And we're going to be looking at the CBD. Just about every lecture we're going to be going into there, and I'll show you how it works. But today we're looking at the DNA, the very central core. And tomorrow we'll look at detail at that gastrointestinal tract cell. But today I want to show you how it's remade. And in that illustration, you begin to understand how all the cells in our body are remade. Now, a photocopy is made of the information, and it's called RNA. You see, DNA can't move, but RNA has the ability to travel down to another part of the cell called ribosome. And ribosome is the little factory where the new cell is made. Here's ribosome. You know, the inside workings of our cell is like a literal city. And I was watching a DVD by the scientists that had written the evolution textbooks. And these are men in their 70s now. And they were saying that they're reassessing what they wrote because they said, when we wrote those textbooks, we didn't know about the inside workings of the cells. There are little outboard motors, there are little other generators, there are conveyor belts. It's just fascinating. In fact, they even said that they believe if Darwin knew about the inside workings of the cell, he would have changed his theory. That's quite phenomenal. It's not a surprise for us, is we? Because we know that we were created in the image of God. And we know that the further in you go into this body, the more marvelous it is. Now, we don't want all the information that's in the DNA. We don't want the information on how to make a new eye cell, liver cell. No, we're only interested in the gastrointestinal tract. And so the information we don't need is switched off, and all the other information is switched on. And RNA is the photocopy, and it travels down to ribosome, the little factory where the new cell is made. And now the new cell starts to be made. The first brick is put down. Maybe this brick is tyrosine. It's an amino acid. You've probably heard that we're built up of protein. All the little amino acids are what we're built together with. Then the next building block goes in. Maybe it's phenylalanine. What glues it together? Minerals. Minerals literally glues us together. Then the next brick comes, and maybe that's methionine. So can you see what happens here? Brick upon brick upon brick is an illustration of how our new cell is made. And every 3 to 5 days, out pops a new gastrointestinal tract cell. Every 3 to 5 days. Okay, question here. If our gastrointestinal tract is remade every 3 to 5 days, how come if someone has irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, how come they don't heal in, let's be generous, 2 weeks? Is that a reasonable question? I'd like to suggest it's very reasonable. And I'm going to address that in detail tomorrow morning when I go into detail in the gut. So let's look at how the new irritable bowel syndrome cell is made. Photocopy is made. It's called RNA. Comes down to ribosome, the section in the cell where the new cell is made, and the bricks are laid down. Maybe tyrosine is present. It's time for the next brick to be laid down, but we've got a problem. There's a piece of information missing in the DNA. Body's not quite sure what to do now, and there's a rogue cell roaming round. Here's the rogue cell. Where did he come from? Well, here's a breakdown from chemicals. Here's a breakdown from genetically modified foods. Here's a breakdown from an electromagnetic field excess in the body. Here's a breakdown from chemicals, and he's always looking at where he can put himself. So he jumps in there. It's time for the next one to go down. Oh no, the person's short in methionine, an important amino acid. What are we going to do now? Well, there's another rogue cell, and he's roaming around, and he just pokes his way in there. And it's time for the next cell. And maybe phenylalanine is there, but phenylalanine, where's he going to fit? He'll just try and put himself in there, and now we've got another problem. The person is short in magnesium, very important mineral that helps with the gluing together. Did you know that caffeine is one of the biggest leachers of magnesium out of the body? I was going to say I don't know about America, but I do. But in Australia and America, it's called their darling. What's a darling? Something they love. And I'm in the airport, and not everyone, but nearly everyone has got their coffee. I caught a flight from Los Angeles not too long ago. It was early morning, 6 o'clock flight, and there's Starbucks Cafe, and there's the lineup. And they're not, you'd call it 8 ounce, we call it 250 mil. No. I don't think it was even 500 mil, that's 16 ounce. I think it was the next one again. Whew. My daughter was working with a gardener, and she had lots of clothes on. We call them woolly jumpers, but you call them sweaters, yeah? We call them woolly jumpers, and they're made out of wool. They're warm. She had all her warm clothes on, and there was a lady she was working with, and she kept getting cold, and to warm up, she kept having breaks and having a hot cup of coffee to warm herself up. Anyway, the next day, Emma bought her a woolly jumper. There is a way to keep warm, and there's a way to have an elusive warmness that really doesn't warm at all. And most people don't realise how much magnesium is being leached out of the body. It doesn't look very happy, does it? And every 3 to 5 days, out pops a new irritable bowel syndrome cell. I gave meetings in New Zealand a year ago. And the meeting I gave was the meeting I'm going to give tomorrow morning, called the gut and irritable bowel syndrome. 30 years she had suffered from irritable bowel syndrome. She took my advice, what she learned in the meeting. 2 days later I saw her. She said, I've stopped bleeding from the bowel, I have no more pain, and my bowel movements have gone from 10 a day to 4 a day. 2 days. Can you see why it can take 2 days? Now she's not healed, but she's getting there. And the body's going, yes. That's why I believe we all should be our own doctors, because only you know how you feel, only you know how your body reacts or responds to things. That's why part of being your own doctor is listening. Like I showed you the knock, if I get a sore joint. And what happens if there's a knock and I take a drug, a painkiller? I want to show you. My body's knocking. What does the painkiller do? Is it still knocking? I just can't hear it. Can you see that? Now, if someone comes to our health retreat on heavy painkillers because of advanced cancer, I don't touch those painkillers. You can't heal when you're in bad pain. But you know what we do? We work on everything else, and it's amazing how quickly they're starting to reduce their pain-killing medication. Now, I've touched on a few things here, but the main thing I want to look at now is what is causing this damage in the DNA. Because God made the DNA such that there are little enzymes that are constantly running up and down, repairing any glitches. But if the basic nutrients are deficient to even make those enzymes, can you see that amazing process God put there? It's having trouble. So what is damaging the DNA? Let's make a list of what's causing damage in the DNA. Chemicals. It is estimated that we are exposed to 30,000 new chemicals every year. That's a bit scary, isn't it? We don't have any say over our neighbour, but we have total say over what's happening in our house. Start to become label readers. In fact, if I buy a lettuce and it's got a grub in it, I'm very excited, because what does that mean? There's no chemicals on it. I can get rid of the grub, but you can get a perfect looking lettuce with no grub in it, but you can't see those chemicals and the damage that they are doing. And little by little, they're building up in the body. I fly a lot, so it is inevitable that I am exposed to. I have no say over that, but I have total say over what goes in my mouth. I can certainly control the things that I have control over, but many people are unaware of the dangers of the chemicals that are going into their bodies. This is why organically grown fruits and vegetables are important today. Now, we're not 100% organic. We do the best we can. We grow as much as we can and we buy bulk as much as we can, but you know, it's in Acts 17 verse 30, it says God winks at our ignorance. You do the best you can and God will bless that. But have a look at what you're cleaning your bathroom with, have a look at what you're cleaning your kitchen with, have a look at what's in your toothpaste, in what you're washing your hair in, your clothes. They are things that you have say over. There's one area of chemicals that's not often seen as chemical, and that is drug medication. You know, Ellen White said drugs never cure disease, they only change the form and location of the disease. And at our health retreat, many people come on medication. I have a look at it and I say, I have no authority to take you off your medication, but you can't come straight off that one. You've got to ease off that one. This one, if you choose to, you can come off it and I'll give you some alternatives. And so when our guests go home, I give them a list of their medication and then I write next to it all the alternatives. But the beauty of being at a retreat is you're being watched. And if worse goes to worse, if the reaction's so bad, you just go back on it. But as you implement the lifestyle changes, and as all your levels come back to normal, you can bit by bit ease off the medication. I think we saw one figure of something like $85 billion profit in 1 year that pharmaceutical companies have. See, the pharmaceutical companies aren't interested in you. The only thing they're interested in is your money. And if you do a study in Revelation on sorcery, you'll find that the sorcery is actually pharmakia. What's the pharmakia? It's pharmacy. In fact, one verse said all nations were drunk by her sorceries, by her pharmakia, by her drug medications. It is not God's ways. Spirit of prophecy says there are many methods of healing, but only one that God approves of. And that is the method that works with the healing powers of the human body. No drug can heal you. Actually, no herb can heal you. No water treatment can heal you. There's only one thing that can heal you, and that is the human body. And that's why it is so important to understand how the body works, because when you understand how it works, you start to understand how you can heal it. And there's a beautiful verse, it's Psalm 104 verse 14, it says, God gave herbs for the service of man. And I praise God for those herbs that work with the human body. What else damages the DNA? Genetically modified foods. Genetically modified foods are a result of the DNA of two species being sliced together. For instance, the DNA of an Atlantic salmon with the DNA of a tomato splicing together, hoping to create a tomato that grows in the snow. But it doesn't. There's this huge grey area that they do not understand. Genetically modified foods can cause cancer because genetically modified foods have the ability to interfere with your DNA. And unfortunately, in America and in Australia, they don't have to say if it's genetically modified. But if you buy organic, you can just about be certain that it's not genetically modified, because if an organic farmer uses genetically modified seed, they lose their organic status. Electromagnetic field excess. We are electrical people. There's a spark of electricity in every cell. Our electrical system, the biggest electrical system in our body is our brain, and it runs according to certain frequencies. So to say electromagnetic field, It doesn't hurt you. We are electrical people. The biggest electromagnetic field's been given off by the sunshine, and the sun is the healer in the sky. It's only when we overdo it and our skin burns that there's a problem. I'm referring to technology, and I'm referring to the excess. Now let's just say that what I have here is a hands-free phone. Now the electromagnetic field given off that is quite high. If I step away a foot, I've actually cut my exposure by half. I go 2 foot away, it's easily 3/4, and I only have to go this far away and my exposure is very, very low. So it's quite amazing how you don't have to go far away from it to get a low exposure. So the problem is when you're next to it a lot. So I say be careful with going to bed. One guy came and he said, I go to bed with my phone every night. He said, I've got my phone, I'm answering, texting, I fall asleep with it, I wake in the night, I'm back on it. That's overexposure. That's having it right here. In fact, be very careful of the room you're sleeping in, because we spend 1/3 of our life in that room. If you're going to charge your mobile phones, charge your computers, etc., have it ideally in the next room, or if you've got no choice, have it in the far corner of the room. So be very cautious of overexposure to electromagnetic field. Never buy a house that's below those huge big electrical towers. In fact, there's about 500 times the electromagnetic field on the planet is under those towers. You know, it used to be that they couldn't build houses under them, but I notice in many housing estates today, they are being built there. And we had one lady, she wrote to me, let me show you, this is her land, and there is this huge big electrical tower just over the back fence. There is her house. Now what they did was they put a pool in. Apparently chlorine pools conduct the electricity and make it more powerful. So she's working here landscaping all around here with beautiful gardens, and the mulch she got cheap and it was a bit mouldy. Now I want to show you what's happening in her body. She's getting this overexposure to this high frequency. The chlorine pool is intensifying it. She's got exposure to the mold, another poison going in. Can you see what's happening in her body? It got to the point that if she went anywhere near, say something like her hands free, her stomach would swell, so she looked pregnant. She's in her late 40s, and even her nipples started to leak, and then it got to the point where she'd dry reach. She just started dry reaching if she was anywhere near technology. Why is that happening with this lady? Because she was full of so many chemicals and poisons. Only one more drop had to come in and she had overflow. Can you see that? You've probably heard of people with chemical poisoning. They can't go anywhere near technology. They can't go anywhere near chemicals. In fact, I had a pen one day that was a particularly strong pen, and I took the lid off, and a man, and he would have been sitting about where that front row is, he said, if you use that pen, I'll have to leave. And yet, it's not affecting me, it's not affecting anyone else. That's because, where am I? Maybe I'm here. So one more drop isn't going to get overflow. Can you see that? So what does a person do with chemical sensitivity? Well, they come to a health retreat, or I think you call them wellness centres in America, and detox. And you get that level down, 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 which I guess is where most people are. Now, her family didn't have the problem because her family were at college, kids were at college, the father was at work all day, and they were in that house, but they weren't getting that exposure like she was because she was working in the backyard. You see that? She said that what she had to do was get all the mercury fillings out of her mouth. She had to start to detox with essential oils and a whole program, and eventually she got it down. If she got on a plane, she'd just start dry reaching. She'd start dry reaching when she went to security. She had no control over it. But it was a whole lot of things together. So be very mindful of your exposure to electromagnetic field. How we love technology. And Michael and I are here, and we've just found out that our phone system on our property's gone down. How wonderful that Michael can email and mobile phone people in Australia and fix that up. Oh, how we love it. And I get a lot of emails every day. So it's important that I answer it. So it's not that you don't do it, you're just mindful of overexposure and how close you get to it. Also, stimulants. Now, what we're doing now is we're looking at the things that are damaging the DNA. Caffeine. How does caffeine damage the DNA? Well, what caffeine does, and I'll be showing you in another meeting later in the week, what caffeine does is it interferes with the neurotransmitters in the brain, and our brain runs according to precision balance. So anything that throws the neurotransmitters out, causing a chemical imbalance, causes the brain to come in with an adaptation process. So what happens when this is happening day after day after day with humans? The DNA where that affects the making of the neurotransmitters is getting damaged, so that person can give birth to a baby with a damaged DNA regarding the neurotransmitters in the brain. So that person can give birth to a baby that has a sensitivity to something like attention deficit syndrome, hyperactivity, even depression, all because of their caffeine habits. Sugar. How does sugar affect the DNA? Well, sugar gets the blood glucose levels up dramatically high, and then the brain responds by speaking to the pancreas. We're too high, so it gets it down, and then it goes too low, and the person has another bit of sugar to get them up again, then it goes up again. See, the up and the down, and the up and the down. Crisis, 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 crisis. It's a crisis to the liver, it's a crisis to the pancreas, it's a crisis to the brain. So we have babies now being born with getting diabetes at 16 months of age. At our health retreat, we've had 2 diabetics, I think, in the last year, little 5-year-old girl, little 9-year-old girl. Oh, they haven't been on the planet long enough. They haven't consumed enough sugar to damage the pancreas. No, they're born with weakened pancreatic genes because of the sugar habits of the parents. In fact, some authors that I've read on this subject, they say parents are the genetic engineers of their children. And if you're feeling very sad right now because you've done everything wrong, I've got some good news. Today is the first day of the rest of your life, and you can start turning things around. And remember, in Acts 17 verse 30, the Bible said God winks at our ignorance. You are not allowed to beat yourself up. Do you remember that's what the devil does? He's the accuser of the brethren. If you didn't know, you cannot be held accountable. But sorry, you now know. Another stimulant is alcohol. We've got children born today with fetal alcohol syndrome to parents that have 2 drinks a week. There is no safe dose of this stuff. It is truly called the devil's brew, and it is. No safe dose of it. Tobacco. Children born to smoking parents can be born with less alveoli in their lungs, big holes in the honeycomb shape that holds the alveoli together. Those children can develop emphysema without ever having smoked. See, it's a good idea for a young couple to hear this lecture 2 years before they conceive. Not everyone has that opportunity or that privilege. But again, it's amazing how quickly the body can turn around once it's given the right conditions. Fungus. The Bible's very strong on this. You read in Leviticus, if there's any fungus or mold in the house, it's to be cleaned up, shut up for a week. The priest comes back. If it's grown again, have you seen what's got to happen to the house? The whole house has to be dismantled and taken outside the city to an unclean space. That's strong words, isn't it? We call it the tip in Australia. I think you call it the dump, is that right? Outside the city. If it's in any clothes, the clothes are to be burnt. It's very interesting. In the King James Version, it's called leprosy in the house, leprosy in the clothes, leprosy on the skin. And if you go to New International Version, the NIV, it says mildew in the house, mildew on the clothes, infectious skin disease on the skin, and yet it's the same word. And if they were translating it correctly, what would it be? Mildew in the house, mildew in the clothes, what's on the skin? Mildew. Doesn't sound too good, does it? What research has been showing this since 1976, the fungal link with disease. Fungus can splice into the DNA of plants and reproduce itself through plants. It can splice into the DNA of, I think there's a few stories of snails and ants that can reproduce itself through. What about humans? Can it reproduce itself through humans? Let's have a look at that. Microorganisms. Fungus is a microorganism. And microorganisms are everywhere. In fact, they're in the air that we're breathing. They're on every surface area. There are more microorganisms in our body than cells. 10 times more. We've got 100 trillion cells in our body. 10 times 100 trillion. Sorry, I can't grab that one. What are they? They're microorganisms. What does the word mean? Micro means microscopic. Organisms mean it's a living thing. And it's interesting because they almost can't put it into a spot. It's everywhere. And whenever cell damage happens, let me give you an illustration. You might have heard of a bird that we have in the bush, and you'd probably call it the woods, a kookaburra. Have you heard of a kookaburra? They've got a laugh that sounds, well, there's a song that says, laugh, kookaburra, laugh, because their call is like a laugh. Let's say a kookaburra, for some reason, hits a tree and dies, and it falls down. What happens to that kookaburra? Do you know there's a whole process to bring that kookaburra back to dust, isn't it? So whenever cell damage happens, these microorganisms have the ability to evolve. And you can call them the cleanup team, or they are often called by microbiologists. A friend of mine's a microbiologist, and he said, that's what we call it, Barbara. We call it the garbage collectors. And their name is bacteria. That's what they are. That's what they do. That is their role on planet Earth. They're the cleanup team. Now let's have a look at the kookaburra. The microorganisms that are an integral part of living, running kookaburra, with death, they had to change roles. They took off their suit of clothes, so to speak, and put their rubber gloves and aprons on and became the garbage collectors. As the environment changed, they now become the exterminators. Exterminators. What's their name? Their name is yeast, fungus. That's what they do. They're part of the breakdown. Now, it's not long after the exterminator stage that the undertakers come in. What do the undertakers do? The undertakers are taking away the dead things. Their name is mould. And it's not long past the mould stage that the matter is now brought back to dust. And what does the preacher say at the funeral? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. He's referring to Genesis 3:19 that says we come from dust, we go back to dust, we're dust. And in Psalm 103, the Bible says, He knoweth our frame, He remembers that we are dust. Precious dust. Dust that the King of Glory laid down his life for. What I have just shown you here and drawn for you is the cycle of life. It's the carbon cycle. And the cycle of life states that nothing is created and nothing is destroyed. It just changes roles. I am not dressed now the way I was dressed sleeping last night. I'm not dressed now the way I'm dressed if I'm swimming. I'm not dressed now the way I'm dressed if I'm digging in the garden. We all change our outfit, our role, according to the environment. I'm not dressed now the way I was 3 weeks ago in Thunder Bay. I had a coat on and boots on. They thought it was warm because there wasn't snow everywhere. We change roles. So do these microbes. They change roles. They change roles according to the environment. A contemporary at the time of Louis Pasteur was Antoine Beauchamp. And Antoine Beauchamp, 6 times professor. And Antoine Beauchamp, he saw this again and again under his microscope. He said germs don't cause disease, they're the result of unhealthful conditions. That's why if any of these are around, we have to put the detective hat on. I'm just going to write my favourite word here. Why are they there? Isaac Newton's third law of motion states that to every action there is an equal and an opposite reaction. Psalm 26 verse 2 states, the curse causeless shall not come. Job 29:16 states, the cause I knew not, I searched out. Ellen White says in page 127 of the Ministry of Healing, in case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. Why are they there? They're just opportunist organisms. They're just going to hang around where there's a lot of food. Antoine Beauchamp got a dead cat one day. He wrapped it in an airtight container and sat it aside. 4 months later, he opened the container. What did he see? One lady said, a dead cat. Dust. Maybe a few bones, takes them longer. What brought cat back to dust? Airtight container. No blowflies, no magpie took a nibble, no dingo took a nibble, no worms came up, as in the kookaburra, no dung beetles. Do you have dung beetles here? They get up and eat the dung and take it back down. It was an airtight container. What brought cat back to dust? The microorganisms that were an integral part of living, running cat took their suit of clothes off, so to speak, put their rubber gloves and apron on and became the clean-up team. Then the exterminators, then the undertakers, until they had now brought matter back to dust. What an incredible process. And if it wasn't for these microorganisms, there'd be so much rubbish on the planet, we wouldn't be able to walk on the planet. With great excitement, Antoine Beauchamp took the dust, put it under his microscope. It was alive with microorganisms, waiting for their next job. He went to the pyramids in Egypt, gathered dust. He went all over the world gathering dust. Every dust had the microbes in it. Do you think the dust from the pyramids was Tutankhamun's dust? We go back to dust. What brings us back to dust? The microbes. Now they're waiting in the dust for their next role. What's their next role? Isn't that why we have compost bins? We have 3 compost bins in our garden. One we're adding to, one is sitting, one we're taking away from. And the reason why organically grown fruits and vegetables have a far higher nutrient content is it's the microbes in the soil. So we put our compost into the soil, into the garden. What are we putting in? We're putting the microbes that were actually caused the carrot to grow, then caused the carrot to ripen, and no one ate the carrot, so the carrot rotted. The same microbes, they just change roles. Let me give you another illustration. Mother hen, we call it a chook, but you call it chickens, yeah? Mother hen or mother chook is sitting on 10 eggs. I come and pick up an egg, shake it violently, put it back under her. Come back 2 weeks later, I hear chirp, chirp. Little chickens are jumping out of their eggs, but where's the egg I shook? Have you seen what mother hen does with it? She boots it out of the nest. Why does she do that? They don't have very big brains. There's a bad smell. Have you noticed? They give off a bad smell, these things. What's the bad smell tell you? Do something. It's toxic, what's coming off here. What did I do when I shook the egg? I caused massive cell damage. And the little microbes in the egg that would have contributed to the building of chicken now had to take their suit of clothes off, so to speak, put their rubber gloves and apron on and become the clean-up team, the garbage collectors, and then the exterminators, then the undertakers, till eventually they brought egg back to dust. Interesting illustration, because the egg is a sealed unit. So now we're putting the compost into the garden. What happens now? Here's the roots. I've got these amazing celery plants that just keep shooting and growing. I've had them for years and years. I put my compost into the garden. What am I putting in? Microbes. Now they play another role. Now they are responsible for the breakdown of the heavy metals and the minerals in the soil. I had a little granddaughter who loved eating dirt. And when her mother changed her nappy, you call it a diaper, yeah? The next day, what was in the diaper, the nappy? Dirt. You can't access it. Aren't you glad we don't have to eat dirt to get our minerals? The microbes in the soil break down those heavy metals and those minerals. Then they are responsible for the absorption of these minerals into the plant. These microbes also protect the plant against harmful pathogens. And these microbes also are responsible for the nourishment of the plant. Now the plant knows that it needs those microbes. So 50% of the fuel that it makes from photosynthesis, it sends back down to the roots to feed the microbes. Beautiful illustration of taking only to give again. Did you know that the law of service is written on every plant in nature? It's written on the microbes. Humans could take note. Hey, everything takes only to give again. The plant knows that. Now I'm going to take this somewhere that you may never have taken it before. Lining the gastrointestinal tract is a thick turf wall. Now, do you remember I said that we have more microorganisms in our body than cells? And lining the gastrointestinal tract are these microbes. When we were in utero, curiously made in the lowest parts of the earth, our gut was sterile, no microbes. When we were born, we were literally showered with our mother's microbes. And when that happens, those microbes form a thick turf wall. And we're going to look at this in a bit more detail tomorrow morning when I look at the gut. Thick turf wall. Now those microbes, and the two permanent ones are called Lactobacillus acidophilus bifidus bacterium. There are trillions down there, and the other species have made from those. They play the same role. They are responsible for the final breakdown of our food. They are responsible for the absorption of our food out of the gut and through to the blood. They are responsible for protecting our blood against any harmful microbes, pathogens that may be in the gut. And they are responsible for nourishing those little cells that are remade every 3 to 5 days. Can you see, ladies and gentlemen, that these are not our enemy? They're an integral part of life on planet Earth. They're an integral part of life in the human body. And without them, we cannot access the nutrients in our food. Without them, we've lost our border protection, so all sorts of nasties can get through and into the blood. Do you remember I said that the gastrointestinal tract is a hollow tube, and anything that goes in there is not part of you or me till it gets broken down and into the blood? It's the microbes. In fact, it is becoming a very large field of research. Whole books are being written on it. Last year in Australia, Catalyst, which is a show that does documentary, they did a 2-part show called The Gut Reaction, and the whole show was on the microbes. You see, it's taking a lot of attention now because most pharmaceutical drugs kill the microbes. So when the microbes are killed and you got gaps in that wall, what have you got now? Lost your final breakdown, lost your proper absorption, lost your protection, and these little cells that are lining the gut have lost their nourishment. And in my meeting tomorrow, I'll be talking about that, enhancing on it a little bit more. The human body runs according to precision balance, and the microbes in our gut is just as applicable to that proper balance. When I was nursing in my 20s, I didn't live right. I had too many drugs, too much alcohol. I didn't become an Adventist till I was 25. And I'd often get a chest cold. And I'd start coughing up yellow lumps. And I was trained as a nurse to think, I've got an infection. Yep. So I'd go straight to the doctor and he would give me antibiotics. Because I was taught that a bacteria was causing my sickness. What does antibiotic mean? Let's have a look. Against life. Do you know, if we're living organisms, we have to get away from this kill mentality, because anything that has the ability to kill a small organism has the ability to kill a large. And what are we? We're the large. Alexander Fleming, 1929, he's growing bacteria in flasks in his laboratory. He comes in one morning and they're all dead. And he knew Newton's third law of motion. To every action there is an equal and an opposite reaction. Why are my microbes dead? He looked around, couldn't see anything that could cause the death. He looked outside the window, he saw sunlight coming down, and he saw this dust on the sunlight. He followed it, and in the next story there was a plate of fruit upstairs, and in the plate of fruit there was a mouldy orange, and the mouldy orange was giving off a dust. It came in, settled on his bacteria and killed it. He called the mould penicillium, and he called the mould waste, which is more toxic than the mould, he called the mould waste penicillic acid. Now that mould waste, the penicillic acid, is the penicillin that we know today. Penicillin has saved the lives of millions, granted. But we've got a problem today. It's the overuse of the antibiotic and the inability of the physician to ask, why are these things out of control? The doctor didn't say to me, how much are you smoking? How much are you drinking? Are you eating proper food? Are you going to bed early enough? No. He just wrote the script and gave it to me. But those antibiotics, they come in and they've just got a kill mentality. Kill. They don't care what they kill. And they start killing off the microbes in the gut. Do you know, one doctor said the human body can cope with 2 courses in a lifetime. Did everyone hear that? Would you like a moment's silence to digest that one? I had one lady come with her daughter. She said my daughter had 22 courses of antibiotics in the first year of life. Ooh, I wonder if that gut will ever heal. Michael and I raised 8 children without antibiotics and they're all still alive. I believe antibiotics should be kept as a life-saving resort. Now the problem is today, someone will go for a sore finger, a little bit of a cough, just any little bits and pieces. And then a serious problem happens and the antibiotics are given and they don't work because they've become immune to them. Why have they become immune to them? Because look what the microbes do. They adapt and adjust. They adapt and adjust. They adapt and adjust. kill them off with the antibiotics. Whoa, bit of a blow, adapt and adjust. Now they're even more resistant. It doesn't make much sense. In fact, there's been a death and no one attended the funeral because no one knew he died. It was the death of common sense. The body has an amazing ability to heal itself. And it will heal itself if you give it the right conditions. And this week, in the series I'm taking you through, I will show you those conditions. And I will not only show you those conditions, I will explain why they are necessary for the healing of the body. And you will be amazed at how simple it is. But I hope that I have just blown to smithereens. Do you say that word? Yeah. The two most common theories for sickness today, which is the germ theory and the gene theory. Germs don't cause disease. They're the result of unhealthful conditions. Genetics loads the gun, but it is lifestyle that pulls the trigger. Ellen White says that the only hope of better things is the education of people in the right principles. Let the physicians teach the people that restorative power lies not in drugs, but in nature. Disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that arise because of a violation of the laws of health. In case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained, wrong habits corrected, unhealthful conditions changed. Then nature is to be assisted in her efforts to expel impurities and re-establish right conditions back in the system. There was a newspaper article in Australia. 100 people had the flu. 50 took antibiotics, 50 didn't. All got better. Did everyone hear that? All got better. But there is a link today, and only since 1976 they've been looking at this link, is the link between fungus and cancer. 1% of doctors today are claiming that antibiotics have caused more problems than they ever cured, and what they're referring to is the fungal link with disease. This is an area so many people are ignorant of, and you can see why it is very difficult for medicine to acknowledge this link, because their most popular drugs are putting the fungus into human beings. Antibiotics, contraceptive pill, all the statin drugs, the cortisones. The body can heal itself. And if it's not healing itself, we have to put the detective hat on. We have to become private investigators and find out why these things are so. And it's usually so much simpler than most people realise. Because I see so much ignorance in this area, and I myself was ignorant in this area, and it wasn't till I went down in a heap and I had to put the detective hat on. It wasn't till I came to death's door and even developed the death cough that I had a good look at this. And that's when I realised, and I looked back at my life. I wasn't breaking the laws now, but way back then, in my teens, in my 20s, I had not lived right. And you know, the body's amazing the way it'll take the waste and it'll just store it. And it'll take the waste and it'll just store it. And then as you start to give the body the right conditions, you start to get sick. Have you noticed? One lady said, I was eating badly and feeling okay. Then I realised I had to start giving my body the right conditions, and then I started to get sick. What did Ellen White say? It's an effort of nature to free the body from the waste. Florence Nightingale said disease is a process of repair. She caused an amazing turnaround in Scutari. The death rate was 50% in that hospital where the wounded from the Crimean War were being taken. She was there 6 months and the death rate went from 50% to 2%. What did she do? She just cleaned up the mess. Doctors weren't washing their hands between operations. She found a man still in his battle clothes. He'd been there for 2 weeks, hadn't been tended to yet. No wonder the British people loved Florence. She was saving the lives of their sons. What, this is 80 years before antibiotics. When she eventually went back to London, they hailed her as a heroine. Queen Victoria, Prince Albert were there to greet her. When she found out, she changed her name to Mary Smith, went down the back gangplank and went home. They said to her later, "Why did you do that?" She said, "I am not a heroine. All I did was increase hygiene," got that? "Sanitation and nutrition." And it's because of the increase in hygiene, sanitation and nutrition that all the childhood diseases were wiped out. Did you know that? In the medical journals it shows. Here we've got polio, diphtheria, whooping cough, measles, mumps, all of them. About here they were. Why was there the decrease? Because of an increase in hygiene, sanitation and nutrition. She's the founder of nursing. And if you were to have a look at her cleanliness rules, you would think she was a bit fanatical. But can you be too fanatical in the sick room? She said the animal refuse needs to be washed off the walls every 2 weeks in the sick room. What's the animal refuse? Everything coming out of a sick person is toxic, because the skin and the lungs, that's the organs of elimination. All the childhood diseases were 3/4, sometimes 80, 90% wiped out. Then the vaccines were introduced. You won't read that in the local newspaper, will you? We've got another graph now. Autism, epilepsy, attention deficit syndrome, cot death. Ooh, it's too painful to look at. That's why we can't forget Florence Nightingale. I don't think they'll ever make a movie of her. The pharmaceutical companies won't let them. She had a dramatic response, all because of an increase in hygiene, sanitation and nutrition. And when she read of Louis Pasteur's theory that germs cause disease, she said, "This is the theory of a man of a very unstable mind." And anyone who believes it, she says, is equally unstable. She didn't know Antoine Beauchamp. This woman had a brilliant mind. Antoine Beauchamp, brilliant mind, 6 times professor. Germs don't cause disease, they're the result of unhealthful conditions. Notice the germ theory and the gene theory take away all responsibility on the human being for what's happening in them. It's not me, it's the germ. It's not me, it's in my genes. No wonder Ellen White said, "The only hope of better things is the education of the people in right principles." She says, pure air, sunshine, abstemishness, rest, exercise, proper diet, use of water, trust in divine power. These are the true remedies. Every person should have a knowledge of nature's remedial agencies and how to apply them. It is important both to understand the principles involved in the treatment of the sick and have a practical training to rightly enable one to use these principles. The process of healing and upbuilding in the human body is gradual, and to the impatient it seems slow. The surrender of hurtful indulgences requires sacrifice. But in the end, it will be found that nature, untrammeled, does her work wisely and well. Those who persevere in adherence to her principles will reap the benefit in health of body and health of mind. Page 127 of the Ministry of Healing, that's 2 paragraphs I've just recited to you, has everything that we need to bring about a healing condition in the body. And I'm constantly astonished at the results that I see when people begin to give their bodies the right conditions. That's exciting, isn't it? I'd like to thank you for your attention this afternoon. Tomorrow morning we're going to be going on a journey from your mouth to the other end, a journey through your gastrointestinal tract. So please bow your heads with me as we close. Father in heaven, thank you so much, for we certainly are an amazing creation, fearfully, wonderfully made. Marvellous are thy works, and that our soul knoweth right well, even more after hearing the things we've heard this afternoon. Father, it makes each one of us even more want to present our bodies, living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to you. It's such a reasonable service. You have done all you could for our salvation. May we each respond, Father, and present to you living sacrifices to bring joy to your heart, is my prayer in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.